Good morning and welcome to Daylight Church Online. We're just so thankful that you're joining us this morning and hope that you have a great experience. We want to let you know that if you'll go to mydaylightchurch.com, there's a card there that says Online Church. And on the Online Church card, it'll tell you everything you need to know about being a part of our online church community, how you can get involved in small groups, how you can give financially, how you can be involved in the service projects that we do. So even if you're in Kansas or Cambodia, you can sure join us and be a part of our church. We'd like you to check it out there and introduce yourself. So go to mydaylightchurch.com and check out the online church card. Thanks. I'm going to be showing my age a little bit, but I remember being 20 years old in 1993 when the last episode of Cheers aired. And at that point in television history, Cheers was the largest viewing audience of any show ever, and it was eventually surpassed by one of the Super Bowls, but over 80 million people, which was about a third of the population of the United States, tuned in to watch the last episode of Cheers. And I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that the moment, at the end of the show, a patron comes and knocks on the bar of the door, and all you see is their silhouette, and Sam yells out to him, "Sorry, we're closed," and then walks into a dark hall, and that's the end. And I remember sitting there, Cheers is over, because I grew up on Cheers. It was NBC must-see television on Thursday nights, and it was The Cosby Show, Family Ties, Cheers, and Night Court. And I feel a little bit like the character in the clip just now. Like my mom should have never allowed me to watch these shows, but every Thursday night the Husband family would line up to watch these shows. And it's not the only show that made television history. You can find lists online of television shows that blew out the viewership of other shows. And over the course of the years, there have been several, but there's one thing there's this show, which you're probably familiar with, Seinfeld. So if you look at the top 5 most viewed episodes of TV of all time, that episode from Cheers, the finale of Cheers, was the second most. The first was the finale of MASH, which I never watched. That was before my time. Some of you probably watched MASH. But the second is Cheers. The third or fourth is Seinfeld, and of course the fourth or fifth is Friends. And you have to ask the question of what did all these shows have in common? And the one thing I think of when I think of these shows, what was the theme song of Cheers? Everybody wants to go where? Everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. And there was something about that. When Norm opens the door, the kid yells Norm, and that's funny because that's what happens in every episode, except this time it's the child, which doesn't make any sense, but that's why it strikes you as funny, is because you're used to the bar. When Norm walks in, everybody knows his name. Everybody yells Norm when he comes in. And I thought about Friends, and I thought, what's one of the most famous little tidbits from Seinfeld that sticks in your mind? Something about an open door. Hey, buddy. Kramer throwing the door open and sliding in almost like he's on gliders of some sort. And Friends, of course, there were apartments that were across from one another in the hall, and there's always somebody coming in through the door. There's like this space where friends congregate, and Cheers and Friends and Seinfeld had that in droves. It was constant and consistent that's what was going on, and in my opinion, that feeds like a universal hunger in all of us. We want that space where we go and we walk in and somebody yells, "Ashley, yay, we're glad you're here." I've always thought it would be really funny if somebody gets up and goes to the bathroom in here, that we would all gather around the bathroom and cheer when they come out, and which would be pretty dumb. Like I wanted to rickroll people by putting a QR code on the back of our bus, and my staff tells me I have terrible ideas all the time. But if we knew everybody's name coming out of the bathroom and we cheered for them and there was a moment of family, that might be the most important thing that happened in here all Sunday morning. There's something about connection with family. There's something about connection with friends that is holy and righteous and right and good and loving. And so I've been, as we're talking about this series, Signs of Life, like how do we're starting to take most of us have taken the masks off at this point. I saw the map of Kentucky, and it's almost entirely green at this point where COVID is concerned. There's a few yellow spots, but it's almost entirely green, and the masks are being taken off, and people are coming out of their homes for the first time in 2 and 3 years sometimes for some people, and the schools are opening up, and the weather's turning, and it feels like the flowers are blooming and life is good. And of course, I've mentioned each week as we've done this series, we're all waiting for the murder hornets. Like we don't know when the rug's going to be pulled out from underneath us. But right now it feels good. And so I've been asking myself, like, what sun is rising at daylight? When we talk about Daylight Church, a lot of the concept of Daylight Church is the sunrise, is darkness to light. And we believe that's kind of the gospel. in a nutshell, is darkness to light. But what kind of sun are we rising here? Like, what is important about Daylight Church? Why do the Daylight thing? Why push forward? And if we're going to push forward, what are we trying to accomplish here? And somehow that norm cry or that name cry just resonates with me. That we have to create a place where people know your name, where we're always glad you came. That last week we talked about love and what love looks like, and we talked a lot about what love doesn't look like and how do we avoid that. But it's one thing to say it doesn't look like this, but then what does it look like? And how do we create a welcoming and warm environment? And I want to tie it into one of the questions we received. And this questions thing is very serious because I would much rather talk about what you want to hear than what I want to talk about in here. And so when you send in questions, it helps me get into your head. And so save this number in your phone as questions@Daylight and send them in. But somebody sent this question last week, and they prefaced it by saying this is a true and honest question because it sounds, I'm assuming they thought it sounded like it could be dismissed as a silly question. It's not a silly question at all. It says, well, why has it become common for churches to sit in the dark? And here we are, sitting in the dark, and there's a lot of truth to it. And so my first thought on the question was, well, that's a really good question. Like why do we do that? I know that I like the vibe. I know that like what kind of vibe we're trying to create here. And it feels a little bit like a nightclub. It feels a little bit like a performance hall or a show of some sort. And it feels homey, I think. There's something to the darkness that allows people to feel safe, and we're trying to create a space where introverts can come to church and feel pretty comfortable, but the extroverts might want to see everybody's faces at all the time. And so that my first thought was, I don't know. I really don't. I've had to process this all week long. I received this question last week, and I've had to process it because why do we do that? And then secondly, it really opened up to me that there's a deeper question here. Like what is church? Is church lights on a platform? Because there's a societal expectation that when you come to church, there's going to be a pastor and he's going to deliver a sermon, and there's a music team that delivers the music, and all that happens at the front of the room. This is a Western culture Christian social expectation. And there's the lighting thing. I think Booker would freak out if we tried to mess with the lights in here at all. You touch him a little bit and he slaps you around back. Yeah, there you go. And so we all know who the real power in the room is. I will not forget, bro. But there's this historical thing where we see throughout church history where preachers got up and preached and congregants came and listened. But a preacher isn't necessarily a pastor. And what does it mean to be a church? And is it everybody faces forward and one person, the personality of the church, stands and addresses the people? And there's some historical background for that and a backdrop for that, but is that really what a church is? And so it's funny how one simple question about why are the lights so dim can make my brain stir quite a bit. And then, so here's my take on what we're trying to accomplish at Daylight Church where that's concerned is you kind of as an American church have to meet that expectation. Like if we stopped doing the 3 songs in a sermon thing, some of you would vanish forever. But if that's not the goal, if that's not what we're trying to accomplish, how do we capture both? How do you remain poignant in a world where there's TikTok and TED Talks, and at the same time people are hungry for a place where they go where everybody knows their name? And you'll notice in our room even we kind of flirt with that line because we have the seats facing forward, but then we've got the tables in the back, and ultimately we'd like those tables to creep up. But then as numbers grow, we have to creep the seats back, and there's this balance thing that goes on all the time. And we're trying to create this space where people will come to church as they understand it and come and listen to a sermon, and hopefully God will speak into their lives and meet them where they are, but then also a place where people stick around afterwards and eat this amazing quiche that was prepared this morning. And we're trying to find that sweet spot. And I hope we can, and we'll never say, yep, we nailed it, because at every given moment, one is going to creep in on the other. But that's what we're trying to shoot for here. And so it's almost, in some sense, it's marketing. In some sense, it's trying to get people through the door. People, if you set up all tables in here and it was a dialogue constantly, there's a lot of people that would never, ever, ever come to your church. They have no interest in the very first time they come in sitting across a table from strangers and getting to know strangers. In the same sense, we want to develop the community where you sit across the table from one another and you know one another by name. And when I say name, I'll get into this a little bit later. When I say name, I mean the name. like the person that the name represents, not just Norm, not just the four letters, but Norm, not just John, but John. We get John. John's not just a guy that I shake his hand and say, "Oh, you're John, I'm Mike." They might meet this week, or I'm sure they've met many times or talked many times, but that Mike knows John, and John knows Mike. And we can't know everybody, and as a pastor, sometimes you carry that weight of you're supposed to remember everybody's name. And if you're supposed to remember everybody's name, you're supposed to kind of know the name, know the person. And one person can't do that. I can't do it. Paul can't do it. Rusty can't do it. As a team, we can't do it. You have to do it. You can't know everybody, but you can know some. And we want to create a community where that occurs. Tied to this question of why is it common for churches to sit in the dark, I made a list last week of the group that I'm in, of God has the worst fan base, and some of the awful things that have happened to people to where they just kind of walked out of church forever and said, I'm done with church. And one of the ones that it wasn't as shocking as some of them. I mean, some of them were legitimate traumatic abuse, and some of them were horrendously ugly. But in this one, when I sat on it for a while and stewed on it for a little while, it became almost as ugly as the others. This person said, my I'm done moment was nothing more than realizing I didn't miss church during COVID. And there's so many people that have reached that conclusion that I don't need church. And that definitely begs the question of what is the church not providing? Like, how is the church not being the church? And this word church in the Greek is ekklesia. In the Greek, does anybody know what ekklesia means kind of literally? It means the gathering. It's the gathering. That's right. It's people coming together. And so this thing of dim the lights, put the spotlight on the pastor, let the pastor get up and entertain and hopefully educate and persuade you. It's important, and it happened throughout the early church, through church history, but it's not what the church is supposed to be. It's not what the church was intended to be, or even by definition is. And so when a person says, I realized during COVID that I didn't need the church, it also begs the question of, like, what are you dismissing? Are you dismissing the church, the thing that we call church, or are you dismissing the gathering? And the gathering is super important. And so as we talk about this idea of where do we go next and how do we grow this thing and what sun is rising, community is foundational, in my opinion. Family is foundational, in my opinion. Knowing one another's names. Always glad you came. When you come in, you're pleased to see people. And I suspect that wasn't going on in whatever church this person was involved with. It says my I'm done moment was realizing church was boring. Church was uneventful. It didn't impact my life. I'm out because I don't need it. And we need community. We need family. There's this article in the Atlantic this week called Why People Are Acting So Weird. And it says, crime, unruly, this is the headline, so you can see it barely above the little green blob there. It says, crime, unruly passenger incidents, and other types of strange behavior have all soared recently. We all saw Will Smith slap Chris Rock at the Oscars this week. And if you're like me, it was gut-churning. It was like, what did I just view, and how is it even possible that this happened like it did? And I'm not taking Team Will over Team Smith, Team Chris. I know the world is polarized into teams already on this thing, and I'm just saying there was something like nauseating about that moment. And people that are ski lift operators are reporting way, way more ski lift incidents over the age of COVID. People getting off ski lifts and hitting each other with their skis and ski poles and getting angry and pushing each other over. And, the ski lift, if you know anything about skiing, coming off the ski lift is the scariest part of skiing when you're just getting started. But there's more like angry incidents happening. Crime is up. Murder rates are up. Reckless driving is up. The article mentions school board hissy fits are up. Car thefts are up. The time to crime window is higher. And the time to crime window is the time period between when a person buys a firearm and when the time person commits a crime with said firearm. And in the past, there's been a much longer gap. And so they're seeing during the age of COVID, people are purchasing guns and going immediately out to commit crimes with those guns, whereas before people stopped to think about it. Everything is crazy and haywire. And the article says this, it says, data on why people behave in rude or uncivilized ways. reveals that the number one reason by far was feeling stressed or overwhelmed. We live in a world right now where most people, we're starting to feel like we're coming out and we're starting to see a little bit of light, but people are still very much stressed and feeling overwhelmed. And the article mentioned this. It said rudeness can be contagious. It said, for example, you might be on a Zoom call with your boss and your boss yells at you. And yelling at you as a boss is far more likely on a Zoom call than it is in person because you're the troll behind the screen now. The screen safeguards you. It's just like raising your fist when you're driving your car. Somehow you think that windshield or that window puts a space between you and the next person. And Zoom isn't great for building genuine connections between people. And then masking as well. When you can't see a person's face, you're far more likely to dehumanize them. And so all of it creates this horrible cocktail of rudeness. And rudeness is contagious. And so if you just came out of a Zoom meeting with your boss and your boss yelled at you, how likely are you to take it out on the cashier that day? You're more likely to take it out on the cashier or your kids or your spouse, your partner, your friends, the stranger in the street, the person who cuts you off in traffic. And so misery perpetuates misery. And as one sociologist said, we are moral beings to the extent that we are social beings. The article mentions this. It says, kids stop going to school, their parents stop going to work, parishioners stop going to church, people stop gathering in general. Sociologists think of all this as isolation shifted the way we behave. And rudeness perpetuates rudeness. Misery perpetuates misery. And so part of the answer, in my opinion, is this someplace you can go where everybody knows your name. Like how do we create something to, and we can't fix it for the entire world. See, we embrace phone calls here. This is a communal church. You do what you got to do. Don't, bro. Don't be ashamed at all. You've got friends, and that's good. Unless that's an enemy, in which case that's not good. So what are we talking about here? And I found this really great Greek word that means the sun we're trying to rise here is the son of Philadelphia. Anybody know what Philadelphia is called? The city of brotherly love. And I'm going to tell you today why it is the city of brotherly love in case you don't know already. There's this passage in 1 Peter 1. This is so fascinating. It says, having purified your souls by obedience to the truth, something happens. So when we think, and I know you guys are reading ahead and going to ignore me until you get to the bottom of the passage, so go ahead, read. There it is, brotherly love. All right, back on the platform. Now give me a... So it says there's like purity. You've purified your soul through obedience. And traditionally, if you ask somebody, what does it mean when a Christian says purify your soul by obedience? They mean avoid illicit sex. Don't get drunk. Don't get wasted. Don't listen to rock and roll, or don't play cards, or whatever the thing, don't wear your skirt so high, or don't wear your hair the wrong way, or whatever the rules are. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. And when we think about purity, that's kind of what we're ingrained to think about. But that's not what this says. And I'm not saying those things aren't important topics, because they're very important topics. Drinking and drug use were up way, 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 way high during the COVID season. And in my opinion, that's bad for society. It's bad for individuals. So it's not to say that those things aren't important, but it is to say that when the author of 1 Peter wrote this, it wasn't the focus. What was the focus? It was brotherly love. It says you've been purified and are obedient. And what does that look like? He doesn't list a bunch of stuff you avoid. He lists one thing that you become. And it's a person who embraces brotherly love out of loving one another earnestly. Man, Scripture challenges me so often in so many ways. And I have to ask, have I ever earnestly loved anybody but myself? Like, what does it look like to earnestly love someone? It's one thing to care, to know your name, but in fact, I saw a friend very recently weeping over the difficult trials that another friend was going through. I mean, just like sincere weeping because this other friend was hurting. And I think, how often does that occur in my life? I see Mike and Mare, and we just talked about the friend they spent the week with, and they spent time with a friend who was suffering, and they had tears in their eyes as they recounted her story. And somehow that's purity. That like when you're obedient to Christ, and obedient doesn't mean I do what you want me to do. It means I submit to you. I give myself to you. I allow you in, and you come in and you do what you want to do in my life. Somehow earnest, brotherly love, like legit, sincere, compassionate, caring for other people shows up. And in the Greek, that brotherly love is Philadelphian, which probably sounds pretty familiar to you. Philadelphia. And I suspect if you walk the streets of Philadelphia, it doesn't much look like brotherly love. It's probably just a mantra. But like, how do you make it more than a tagline? Brotherly love. How do you create a church that cares and is earnestly loves one another? Like loves one another. It changes how you view church. It changes how we do church. It changes all kinds of things. And so I asked myself this question this week, and then I tried to come up with some points that correlated with my answer. How do I experience love? Like if I was to say, so-and-so loved me and loved me well, what did they do? What did it look like for them to love me well? What are the data points, basically? And I came up with this list, and I want to share it with you because I think when we start to think about how we experience love, it says a ton about how we offer love, how we give love. And so your list may not be the same as mine, but I also tried to think of, like if I just surveyed the room, if I surveyed all my friends on Facebook, like how do you experience love? I think some of the answers would be pretty consistent. Faithfulness would be one of them. Appreciation would be one of them, being seen. And so I want to go through that list. And number one, I just want to encourage you to emerge. And by emerge, I mean come out of the COVID cave, come out of the I don't need church anymore cave. Church online, just Andy Stanley sermons are just fine for me. That's all I need. And which isn't to diminish Andy Stanley at all, but we live in a world where you can get preaching way, way, way better than mine on any given Sunday morning, anywhere, just by getting online. But we're talking about the ecclesia. You're needed. You guys are here right today, so I'm preaching to the choir, but we have an online audience as well. And I will encourage you to, and I don't just mean emerge by like show up, but when I think about what I want from a friend, the number one thing that I think most people would say, and the number one thing that comes to my mind is someone who's there for me. Doesn't that ring true that if you're going to experience love of a friend, like proximity? And it doesn't even necessarily mean geographic proximity. It just means I know they're always there when I send a text. I know they're always there when I pick up the phone. Not with millennials, you should ever pick up the phone. I hope you know that rule. Always, always text. But they're always on the other end of the text line, somebody who's always there for me. And so proximity, being there, means something. And so if we're gonna create a community here, community is communal. It means involvement of many folks. It means showing up. It means walking through the door, making a choice to be there. It's a loving choice to show up. Again, I hope from last week's sermon, this isn't like a power-hungry preacher saying we need to fill the pews so that we will achieve some kind of ministerial satisfaction. I know that's all there. It's all a part of the weirdness, but if there's going to be a community, it requires people and people being there and people showing up. And then you can go beyond that. So we have an online ministry for people that attend remotely. And some of these people live in remote areas where they've tried to find a church that vibes with them and they can't. We find other people that are in Phoenix, Arizona and such, or in Singapore, and they just, for whatever reason, haven't found the Christian community they want. I'm not just talking about showing up at Daylight Church, and if anybody ever watches this or listens to it that attends another church, I'm talking to you too, is be a part of a community. And so that might mean getting on meetup.com. It might mean calling a friend and saying, let's do lunch, or meeting a stranger and saying, hey, I'd like to get to know you better, let's do lunch. It means emerging from me-centered life. And the way it changes your church, or membership, or viewership might even be an adequate way to describe it, is it moves from me to us. That's ecclesia. When church becomes a thing where you come in and you say, well, let's see if I'm going to get anything from this sermon today. I'm going to gauge it. I'm going to give you a secret truth that pastors face, is when somebody comes up to you and says, great sermon today. Sometimes what we hear is, I agreed with your sermon today. And so many people, that's the purpose of church, is to come in and get fed something they already believe, to come in and experience personal growth, to come in and sit in the dark and listen to a sermon and listen to some songs and then walk away. That's not ecclesia. That's something necessary to create ecclesia, in my opinion, but it's not ecclesia. And so church becomes it moves from a me-centered thing. And that doesn't mean don't ever tell me, great sermon today. So please tell me. I need. But it just means, like, check yourself as to what your purpose is for being here. Check yourself as to how you funnel this whole thing. And we need you to be a part of a community, not just a pew warmer. We need you to step in and be connected to people so that when somebody comes in, Rusty and Paul and I and Becky and I, we don't have to know every single name because you guys are doing that in addition to us doing it. So stepping out and pull the shades of your home. My wife, who is quite wise, turned me on to a book this week. But can you agree that part of experiencing loving friendship is being seen for who you are and loved anyway? Isn't that true? Like, part of what we want, what we need, that universal hunger in us is that somebody would see us, like really, truly see us. I got one of the best compliments of my life on a sermon recently. They wrote in and they said, "I felt seen during your sermon," which is a little bit different from great sermon. It registered with me a little bit differently because we all want to be seen. And to me, that felt like I got to offer love to somebody that day because we want to be seen. We want to be understood. We want to be understood and appreciated. And without understanding, the appreciation doesn't mean much. And so seeing. So she's turned me on to this book titled The Ministry of Ordinary Places by Shannon Martin. And in this book, Shannon talks about, she says, how exactly are we supposed to become a community of compassion, kinship, and love? She says, what I'm learning is that it's as simple as looking out the window and noticing. She talks about in her community, she opens the windows. She's got these accidental big glass windows in her living room. When they built their house, they made the windows too big. And she's finding out that there's no such thing as too big where the windows are concerned. And she sits and she watches. And she watched one young boy, a teenager, come back and forth across the sidewalk in front of her house over and over at a time when he was supposed to be in school. And she went out and engaged him because every day he'd come by at the same time, and every day he'd leave at the same time, and it wasn't the right time for him to be passing by. And so she engaged him in conversation and found out that he had been kicked out of school, and sort of allowed herself to move into his life, and he allowed her in. And it's a really touching story that I'm not going to get into today, but it was the idea that with the curtains open, the windows drawn, you start to see people. And that's one of the difficulties of the forward-facing congregation model of church, is that you guys see me right now and don't much see each other. And then if you're inclined like I am to introversion, then you bolt for the door as soon as possible, and then you still don't see each other. So there's something about not just showing up, but seeing the other people around you. She says this, she says, fences will fall. We will find ourselves breaking from the conventional wisdom that says we are to mind our own business. We've been taught to keep our distance, and I'm going to address that in just a second because it's important that we read the room. But I want to encourage you to approach people that are different than you are. They say the cure for bigotry is being well-traveled, which is one of the best quotes I've ever heard in my life, is to get to know other people that are different than you are, racially, socioeconomically, culturally, politically. Scary. Get to know people that are different than you. I heard somebody talk about a conversation with somebody they thought they were going to hate, and they sat down and got to know them, and how deeply just sitting across the table from them humanized them. And humanization is a dangerous thing if what you want is polarization. You can sit across the table from each other. And then it's just something as simple as actually learning people's names. Like legit, when we started Daylight Church, before we launched, I went from church to church trying to figure out what we wanted to do, what we wanted to make sure we never did, like what we could learn from other churches. And I remember two churches, I visited probably a dozen churches, and I remember two churches in particular that I left thinking that would be my church. If I wasn't starting Daylight Church, that would be my church. And in both cases, in one case, it's because literally, as I left, the greeter said, "See you later, HL." That ministered to me, that spoke to me. He met me on the way in. When the service was over, he remembered my name as I was walking away, and I thought, this is a church I want to be at. And the other was, I left the church knowing that if I wanted to, I had met people that I knew if I wanted to have lunch with them the next day, I could. That was a factor to me. There were churches that did music better. There were churches that the preacher was more articulate. But there was something about those churches where they said, see you later, HL. They got me. They win. There's something about being known. There's something about knowing someone's name. And so make it a focus. Now, I want to say to all you extroverts here, you need to read the room. If this is what a person looks like when you're talking to them, stop talking to them. Because if you're anything like me, you want someone who not only sees you, who not only is present and sees you, but someone who gets you, right? They feel your vibe. They gel with you. And in some sense, introverts, they come to a church, and the last thing in the world they want is to sit at a table and meet people for a while. I remember meeting one couple at Daylight Church early on. They came up, they shook my hand on the way out the door. They said, we want you to know we're going to hide for a while. And what they meant was, we're trying to sort this thing out. We're trying to figure out if we like you people. We're trying to figure out if we jive with this. We're trying to figure out if we even want to be in church at this point. And we just wanted you to know that we're not going to be showing up for stuff. We're just going to hide in the back for a while. And how do you create a balance of creating a darker space where people can come and do that, and a brighter space where extroverts can do whatever you guys do, and I don't understand it at all. And we're trying to find that place, and there comes some personal responsibility with that. I saw recently that they say a good lover, and by a good lover it means romantic or otherwise, a good lover figures out what the person needs as more important than what they feel they need to give. So important. If you're into fishing and you buy your wife fishing gear because you want her to be into fishing, and she's not into fishing at all, you have failed. It's the same sense when it comes to people's needs in here. Read the room. Read people's body language. Read people's posture, their expressions. If people beeline for the door, don't stop them and say, hey, we're creating a community here. I'm a super community person, and I am your judge and guard. Let them do it. But also be aware that the time might come when they engage you in conversation, and you can read that room too. And so reading the room goes beyond just when people don't want your presence or don't want you there. It also means knowing good and well when they do want you there, and that goes back to pulling the shades. It means watching. Not like stalker watching, not like every breath you take, I'll be watching you watching. That's just the worst song of all time. But it does mean you observe people and you look for openings to serve, and sometimes serving means leaving alone. And I don't know all the answers to that, but it's just an awareness principle. Learn to take a good confession. I want someone who shows up, not always, that's me, but I want somebody who's there when I need them and that I can be there when they need them. I want somebody who sees me. I want somebody who reads the room, but I also want somebody that when I'm flawed and awful and ugly, they embrace me anyway. Imagine a priest comes in, the little door between the confessional opens. Father, forgive me. It's been 7 months since my last confession. And the priest says, what did you do now? And they tell him, and they say, of course you did, because you're a loser. It is gross, but some of us live our lives that way. Some of us live our lives dismissing people, looking down on people, belittling people. And to take a good confession, I mean figuratively, meaning be approachable. Be a person who isn't shocked. You find out real quick as a pastor, I have this advantage you guys don't have, in that it's easier for me to look at every individual and say, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with me. Because when people share their confessions with you, you start to see kind of across the globe, everybody is a mess. I mean, and in some sense, you'd be shocked. You would be shocked at some of the confessions a pastor hears. And I don't even have a confessional. And what it means is we're all in the same boat. We all have the same difficulties. We're all the same mess. And we all have that need for somebody to know our name and to love us and care for us anyway. And so when I say take a good confessional, I don't mean start a confessional booth which might be kind of cool. Put one on the street. Oh, my wheels are turning now. But what I mean is be approachable. Don't be the priest that scoffs, but be the priest that embraces and helps. And then finally, slow down for folks. Slow down for people. I want somebody who makes time for me. I'm an introvert, so that time doesn't have to be a ton, but I want somebody who's responsive to me and there with me. And that always requires time of some sort. And this honestly is the hardest one for me to embrace because I'm such an introvert and I'm so much in my own head. But I was driving this week. I had an hour and a half drive to listen to a 2.5 hour podcast. And the podcast was on Molinism versus Calvinism. And they were talking about the various syllogisms that back up each worldview and the presuppositions that you have to hold on to embrace Molinism, to embrace Calvinism. This is the nerdy stuff, nerdy theological stuff that I listen to constantly. And I'm sitting there trying to pull it all in, and I realized that because I always listen to my podcasts on 1.5 times speed, they sound like Mickey Mouse, talking about Calvinism versus Molinism and the presuppositions and syllogisms. And I'm thinking, okay, got that. I'm probably not even focusing on my driving. And then all of a sudden I thought, what is wrong with you? Like, wouldn't I have been far, far, far better served to put on this debate, listen to a couple sentences, turn the podcast off, which this is the motion for turning off a podcast, obviously. Turning the podcast off and stewing on it, marinating on one point, and really letting that sink in. I guess I'm kind of smart, but I'm not smart enough to absorb the 2.5 hour podcast in 1.5 hours. But I realize about myself that that's kind of how I'm tempted to live my life. And because I'm tempted to live my life that way, so much, so fast, do everything, do it when you can, get it done, sometimes that probably bleeds over into my relationships. I know that I'm bad at when you're talking to me, sometimes I look at my watch. Which isn't to say that there's not a time and a place to look at your watch, because you need to read the room. But it is to say, if we're going to make time, if we're going to love people well, it means giving up our greatest resource, which is our time. And so that means when the door's open, there's freedom to leave. There's freedom to leave. But we've got this food in the back. We've got the table set up. It means take some time to get to know somebody that you don't know, to hear them, to listen to their story, to read the room, to figure out are they in a place of vulnerability, are they in a place of pain, where are they at, and can I serve? And it's reciprocal because it's a blessing to everybody. And so emerge, open the blinds, read the room, take a good confession, and slow down. Colossians tells us this about who we are to become as a church. It says, above all, put on the L word. Put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body, and be thankful. It says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. When we come in here to Daylight Church, I get it that on a Sunday morning, and we will continue to do it this way. We have the lights and the stage and the preacher and the music and the prayer afterwards, but we're trying to create a community where that's just like the front door. That's the door that you open where everybody yells your name when you come in. That's step one. It's not the whole thing. And if it becomes the whole thing, we've failed as a church. When we have these community groups, when we go feed our friends downtown, when we do the service days, all that stuff is strategic for this one purpose of creating a family. And I want to encourage you to step into that family and make it your own. Own it and live it out. We need you, and you need us. You can't know everybody's name, but you can play a part in making sure that every time somebody comes in here, somebody knows their name, and by name, I mean the name. That everybody who comes in here for a little while will be embraced and loved and feel that Cheers vibe.